this clip, we will be looking at different irrigation methods and irrigation scheduling. Orchards can also be managed without irrigation, which we term rain-fed. It works best in areas with high rainfall. There are some constraints when doing that. The one is the amount of water available to the plants. So a deep soil depth is required so that enough water can be saved for times when it doesn't rain. Other water conservation strategies like mulch would also be implied. Managing a rain-fed orchard can be difficult in a number of ways. If you have a dry spell during a critical period, you are bound to lose some productivity. Managing fertilizer applications is quite complex. If you need to apply fertilizers at a specific time and there's no rain, the sun can scorch that into a gaseous form and you can lose it. Or if a big rain event comes, most of it can be flushed away. In a micro-irrigated orchard, water normally enters the tree rows with sublateral lines. Spaghetti tubes are connected to these lines. They end into a nozzle with a specific delivery rate for a specific set point. This nozzle is connected into a little frame and a specific spreader is selected for the orchard setup. It can be a short, medium or long range spreader. It is important to, from time to time, test the uniformity of your micro sprinklers. You can do that by installing rain gauges at specific intervals, just testing the delivery into each of the rain gauges. Because not all micro sprinklers have the same capability of a uniformity of delivery, as nozzles mature and as spreaders mature, they are basically worn by silt and other particles in the water. The delivery rate and spread changes. Depending on the root depth and the effective soil depth of your orchard, you may need to irrigate twice up to 5 times a week for a mature orchard. Normally, micro irrigation systems handle shallower root systems better than drip irrigation systems due to the fact that they have a larger spread and therefore a larger soil water reservoir. Basic management requirements for a micro irrigation system is to regularly check your micros. You need to check that there's no blockages in the nozzles or in the spreaders itself. It's important to regularly test the delivery rate of the nozzle, and if it's worn, you need to replace it, same as for the spreader. It's important to continually make sure that there's no weed growth within the radius of the micrate. For instance, this little tree standing here will gather up and catch a lot of water, preventing it from reaching the other side of the tree. With drip irrigation, you apply the water and the nutrients directly to the root zone. It's either a button that's plugged into a sublateral line, or it's a little dripper that's welded into the plastic pipe. If you cut the pipe open, the specific design of drip is a pressure compensated dripper. You can see there's a little filter. If you take that away, underneath it there's a little diaphragm. It pushes down on a labyrinth or the flow path that slows the water down so that it exits the dripper at the exact rate. This diaphragm, because it's pressure compensated, if the pressure in the pipe is high, it presses down onto the labyrinth and lets water through at the exact same pace as when the pressure in the system is low, and then the diaphragm lifts and let water go slower through the process. And also this little labyrinth here creates turbulence in the flow path so that floating particles do not settle out and block the dripper. And it has a little extra benefit that because the diaphragm is movable, when it does block, it starts vibrating and basically pushes out the little sand particle or piece of vegetation. Because the flow through drippers are so much smaller than a typical microsystem, you can irrigate much larger areas, or alternatively you can use a smaller pump to do the same area. Because you are wetting such a small portion of the total area of the hectare, only a little bit of soil is exposed, and there's only a little bit of water that's evaporated. In a micro irrigation system, you wet much bigger portion of the hectare, up to about 70%, or in this case it would be 20 or 25% of the hectare. So the tree uses the same amount of water. So to get the same amount of water into the tree, you need to just refill that small reservoir more frequently. Because your wetted area is so small, the only way to get to a decent soil reservoir is to have a deep soil depth. Some of the complexities of the drip system includes filtration requirement. Because you're sitting with such small flow paths, you need to make sure that there's no blockages that enter the system. Further, you need enough dripper pots or emitters for every canopy size. We work with a rule of thumb of about 2.5 to 3 square meters of canopy area for every drip emitter. Well, the overall management of a drip system is complex. You cannot see the water. You have to rely on some soil probe to see how deep you irrigate. As macadamia farmers, it's important for us to know exactly what is going on in our soil. Soil condition, soil water levels, and if we don't measure it, we cannot manage it. There are many different ways to measure soil water content. The continuous logging capacitance probes, like this one, and this is a tensiometer. It's also quite a traditional tool, and it's still widely in use. When we talk about the tensiometer, it's basically a perspex tube that's connected to a porcelain tip. This porcelain tip simulates the root situation. And on the other side there's a vacuum gauge, and it basically gives you an indication of how hard roots would pull to get water into themselves. Normally we install at least 2 tensiometers in a tensiometer station. One shallow one, normally in the center of the root zone at 30 centimeters, and then we install one tensiometer at the level below the root zone. This is a 90 centimeter tensiometer, and it was installed at about 800 millimeters. The idea how one schedules with a tensiometer is you want to keep the shallow tensiometer, which is in the root zone, you want to keep that moist. These capacitance probes give you approximation of the volumetric content of water in the soil. It gives you historical data. It measures 5 depths every hour, and it gives that trend over weeks or months or even years, so you can adapt your irrigation scheduling to the water level in the soil. When considering irrigation scheduling, it is both a science and an art form. At the heart of irrigation scheduling is the age-old question set: when should I irrigate and how long should I irrigate for? We use atmospheric measurements, soil parameters and plant parameters to determine when to irrigate. How long to irrigate we determine by the effective soil depth, the effective root depth, the soil texture, in other words, the reservoir that you are filling, then the supply that the irrigation system can deliver. That answers the question, how long can you irrigate? The canopy coverage and the phenological state of the plant. How much water do I require? Know your orchard, the trees and the soil conditions well, and understand the irrigation system. Measure what you can. Manage your irrigation system within its boundaries. Keep nozzles and spreaders uniform. Schedule your irrigation so that the soil profile dries out from the bottom, whilst the heavily root-populated top is kept moist.